In the world of long travel enduro single crown forks, there are no bigger players than the Fox Factory 38 and the Rock Shox Zeb Ultimate. We've spent the last few months going back to back reviewing these forks, comparing the pros and cons against each other in terms of which is the ultimate performance when it comes to all-out superior quality. In terms of weight, both these forks are actually quite closely matched at right around 2.3 kilos. In terms of value, or in terms of dollars, here in Australia, just a little under 2,000 bucks for the Rock Shox Zeb Ultimate and a little over 2,000 bucks for the Fox Factory Level 38. So quite similar in paper in terms of dollars and weight, but in terms of performance and how they ride, that's what we're going to rip into in this video. Scotty, you've had both these forks on your bike now for a few months. Start by giving us a bit of an overview of the Rock Shox Zeb, and then we'll do a little overview of the Fox Factory.
Yeah, sure. So I've actually run I've actually run a few sets of Zebs on my current enduro bike. These have obviously the new Zebs, new cartridge, new buttercups. This fork I run here is a 170mm fork, so they offer this fork in 160mm up to 190mm. Same with the Fox 38's as well. And yeah, suffice to say, for a big hitting single crown fork, they're pretty comparison to, you know, a lot of downhill forks on the market. You know, they're a single crown downhill fork basically. So I'm super impressed with the Rock Shox fork, plenty of adjustability, but I'm also pretty equally impressed with the 38 as well.
It's really interesting. One of the things, so I've ridden both these forks as well, and one of the things I sort of notice on them is, in terms of the feel, they're really quite close, I would say, in terms of the stiffness we were talking about, the torsional stiffness. And you're right, if you've ridden like a triple camp fork of past, and you jumped on one of these, you'd think you're on the same thing. They're like, it's pretty incredible how stiff single crown fork's gotten and how much confidence that sort of breeds when you're ripping down a trail. In terms of the dampener though, I found the forks have a very different feel. Of course, the latest generation 38, this has got the Grip X2 inside it, and that one's obviously got the Charger, the latest one, which is a 3.1. Run us through some of the differences between the dampers that you found.
Well, without getting into like all the super tech talk, without, you know, boring everyone to death at home, the biggest, like, I mean, chassis wise, stiffness wise, was, as we've just discussed, in relation to how they perform out in the trail. You know, both these forks are super composed, especially when you're riding really fast under the rough stuff. You can really lean on these forks, and they're both super capable forks, especially when, you know, you're riding tapped, you know, like I said, comparable to a downhill fork. Probably the biggest differences I find with these forks is there's less adjustability with a Rock Shox fork, in the sense there's less clicks. So, but when you're actually changing your low speed compression, high speed compression, low or high speed rebound, you're getting a definitive change in the fork, if that makes sense. So I probably find this fork a little bit more user-friendly to set up. But if you're going to a 38, there's a little bit more smaller increments between that adjustment, and maybe the adjustment is, I wouldn't say more refined, but there's a lot more way to really get those increments shorter together if you're into really sort of setting up your bike to the nth degree. So in layman's terms, these are probably a little bit more of a user-friendly fork to set up, and the 38s probably take you a little bit more time to set up, if that makes sense.
I actually completely agree with you on that too. I found I got a little bit lost in the settings, especially with the the two rebounds settings. Like obviously you make your adjustments. You know, I write down a little bit of paper, I got a little diary that I put my settings. But then I kind of got lost as to like where I was at with the two settings. Whereas with the Rock Shox, I found just having that single rebound, the clicks on or all the way off, and then you like clicking back, I found it a little more kind of predictable and a little easier to kind of gauge where I was at when I was experimenting a little. That said, I also felt the Fox maybe felt a little more mechanical when it's sort of entering its travel. It felt like there was a little bit more going on in there, whereas I think the Zeb's feels a little smoother, or a little more consistent maybe. But I guess that a lot of that comes down to the settings, because obviously when you're setting up the damper, it's kind of got more stages, it feels like, the Fox versus the Rock Shox.
Yeah, look, it depends on how like you set your fork up. And one thing I should say is, like, when you look at the factory settings on these forks between the Fox and Rock Shox, they're pretty close to what you should be setting your bike up. So as far as your weight and that goes, depends obviously where you ride. I mean, I prefer to set my, as you've felt my bikes, you always jump on my bikes and goes, geez, you run these pretty stiff, you know what I mean? But coming from like a downhill racing background, I, tend to set my suspension up pretty firm, pretty planted. However, you can run these super soft, super lively, and everything in between. So one thing I'd say is, a lot of people set and forget, but I wouldn't be afraid to play around with your settings a bit with these as well. And what the factoring settings are, they're a pretty good guide. However, you can still go outside those variables, if that makes sense. So I tend to set my air spring up, and then I will set up my rebound, and that's a base level. And then I'll play around with my compression settings after that as well. But I tend to run mine pretty open. So I don't really run too much high or low speed compression. I will play around with it a little bit depending on where I ride my bike. So if I go to Threadbow, or if I go to the Blue Mountains here, steep and rough to where it's smooth and fast, I will play a little bit with the settings. And obviously sometimes I'll play obviously a little bit around with the volume spaces as well, but I tend to run 2 volume spaces and then I'll change with the settings. But without going on, like, you're right, like, these do feel a little bit different, not in a bad way. The 38's an amazing fork. The Zeb is also an amazing fork, whereas those have a very refined, very, as you said, a mechanical feel, but in a good way, where these have a bit more of a user-friendly and a bit more of a natural feel.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the Fox is kind of a bit more of a go-to for like someone that's really racing, or someone that's really interested in customizing their setup and tinkering their setup, whereas the Zeb feels a bit more of a set and forget. It's something you could get, stock on your bike or upgrade to as an aftermarket, set them up, at the shop, or set them up, and then that's basically how you're going to run them pretty much for the life of the fork, until obviously you got your service increments and whatnot. Yeah. But really, whereas the Fox, it feels like you're going to be adjusting to suit the trail, adjusting to suit maybe the elements or whatever, if you're doing a bit of racing. Let me ask you, which fork do you reckon would be better suited to the e-bike?
Yeah, so funny enough, I've actually, we've got another test bike at the moment where I've been running a set of these new 38's on an e-bike, and I've got another e-bike where I've actually been running these Zebs. So we obviously ride e-bikes a fair bit out here in the Blue Mountains as well. And to say the least, like, the comparable between e-bikes with these forks, both of them are sick. Like, they're both unreal. Like, if you were to go and buy, as you said, like, if you're going to go and buy a 38, you really like to tinker with your bike. You like to play around with your settings, you set up. Now, like, the 38 is like an excellent fork, super composed, excellent performance-wise in a variety of conditions, a variety of terrain. Like, it is a super belly fork. But the 38, like, in comparison, like, I've always been a massive fan of Rock Shox and the SRAM products. I'm a super big fan of the Zebs, hence why I've run them on my personal bike. I really, really like the Zebs. But with that said, if you were riding an e-bike, you're riding an enduro bike, free ride bike, whatever, and you're considering, a big belly fork, and you were going to invest in a 38, or you were going to invest in a Zeb, you're not going to be disappointed with either fork, because they're both absolutely unreal. And there's a reason why Fox and Rock Shox are really leading the market in suspension products, and why they've done so for such a long time. It's because they both make unreal products.
That's the thing. I think one of the things that these two forks highlighted for me is just how good suspension's gotten. Like, obviously, we're talking the factory level in the 38, we're talking the ultimate level in the Zeb. It's just a real, like, trying to, I guess, split the performance of both. Like, they're both so good, and they both allow you to ride probably over your head and safely 100%. Than you would otherwise. Like, there is a real difference why, like, so the difference between a Zeb and, dropping back to like a Lyric, or the 38 versus the 36. When you step up to the bigger travel, the bigger diameter fork, it's a noticeable difference.
Oh, dude, I actually rode a bike, a little while ago with a new set of Lyrics on it, and they are a different fork. Like, I can see the Lyric being your enduro / trail racer fork. However, obviously a lot of guys on the EDR are going for the bigger fork. So a lot of guys are still running the Lyric, or they're running the 36s as well, which are still great forks. But there is a noticeable difference. I mean, think about it, when we were racing downhill bikes back in the you know, flat out in the 2000s and whatnot. I mean, I'd rather run a set of these than an old Boxer.
That makes a ton of sense. Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that you really notice, I found with the Zeb and the 38 is you could just hang off the back of the bike, sort of point and squirt, and especially tracks are getting gnarlier these days.
Oh, dude.
Lines getting bigger, jumps getting bigger. The compliance of the forks and what they allow you to attack versus, you know, what we were able to hit on a single crown fork even, you know, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Noticeable difference.
Oh, dude, I mean, you've got these, like the guys, I mean, Seminuk run a 190 version of these at Rampage.
Rampage.
I mean, that's saying something, isn't it?
Exactly. Gone are the days when you needed a triple crown fork just to be able to kind of attack and get into those trails. So yeah, there you have it. These are the top of the line from both brands. Real hard to split the difference. As we said, a little more kind of mechanically here with the Fox, a little smoother with the Rock Shox, but essentially on paper, weights and dollars, very, very close, the two different forks. So
both unreal.
Really interesting review on these. Stay tuned to our channel for plenty more